Okay, October 22nd, 2025. You might want to circle that date on your mental calendar
Yeah, definitely.
because that is arguably the precise moment when the biggest sci-fi debate out there, the one about humans merging with machines, enhancing ourselves,
Yeah.
it just stopped being some like theoretical philosophy class discussion
Hmm.
and became this really urgent question of, well, when is this actually happening?
Exactly. It was the moment where all that speculation, all the, utopian dreaming,
Mhm.
it suddenly slammed in to verifiable, concrete physics.
And the catalyst was a single announcement.
A single definitive announcement from Google's quantum AI team. They said they'd achieved a verifiable quantum advantage
Okay.
using their Willow chip and this new thing called the quantum echoes algorithm.
And this wasn't just another small step.
No, no, this was different. This wasn't just like incremental lab work.
Mm-hmm.
Our sources frame this as hard proof.
Mm-hmm.
Proof that the kind of exponential technological progress that futurists like Ray Kurzweil have been talking about for years. It's not just happening, it's accelerating
Mm-hmm.
dramatically. And suddenly, this idea of a post-human age doesn't seem so far off.
Okay, let's unpack this then, because it feels like we're standing at a huge crossroads here.
We really are.
And our deep dive today, it's all about navigating the philosophical storm that this new scientific reality has kicked off.
Right.
We've got sources outlining two totally opposed camps, really. On one side, you have the tech optimists, people detailing just staggering potential. Things like digital immortality, radical life extension.
Martine Rothblatt's freedom of form.
Exactly, freedom of form, led by thinkers like Kurzweil, like Rothblatt.
But then on the complete other side, you have these really profound warnings coming from humanists, political thinkers, people who see this not as utopia at all, but as potential social catastrophe.
Like what specifically?
Things like the destruction of, the human essence, the death of political equality as we know it, the rise of some new permanent elite class.
And who's voicing these concerns in our sources?
These warnings come from critics like the biologist P.Z. Myers, the political theorist Francis Fukuyama, and the computer scientist Jaron Lanier.
Okay. So our job today is really to navigate this whole debate for you, the listener, so you can really get a handle on the stakes.
And the stakes are, well, they're immense. Pretty much everything.
All right. Let's start with the science then, because the science is what suddenly makes these wild predictions seem possible. What exactly was achieved with this verifiable quantum advantage?
Okay, so it boils down to this. Google's quantum computer performed a specific computational task that is just fundamentally beyond the reach of any classical supercomputer. Doesn't matter how big or powerful you build it.
And that task was?
Measuring something called out-of-time order correlators.
Oh.
OTOCs for short.
OTOCs, right.
Yeah. You can think of OTOCs as basically a mathematical tool for tracking how chaos spreads in a quantum system, how information scrambles.
Okay. Sounds complicated.
It is. They're notoriously complex to calculate, but they're absolutely essential if you want to understand how energy and information move through really complicated physical systems.
Yeah.
Like, think about complex molecules or new materials.
Now, you stress the word verifiable. That's the key difference from earlier quantum claims, isn't it? We've heard quantum supremacy thrown around before.
Exactly. That's the crucial distinction.
But the results often seem like, well, just random noise. Impressive maybe, but useless.
Precisely. Before this, quantum computers did things like random bit sampling. And okay, mathematically it showed they could do something classical computers couldn't, but the output was just noise. Statistically interesting, maybe, but practically useless.
So what's different here?
Here, this quantum echoes algorithm produced what they called a useful, trustworthy answer, a specific quantum expectation value. And crucially, they could check it.
How?
Well, they could cross-validate it, either by running simulations on smaller, well-understood quantum systems, or by using established physics principles to confirm the result made sense.
Ah, okay. So it proves quantum computers can give us not just speed, but reliable answers for actual scientific problems.
That's the breakthrough, reliability. It moves from a physics experiment to potentially a scientific tool.
Okay, let's talk about the mechanism. This quantum echoes algorithm. You said it sounds like sci-fi. How does this quantum butterfly effect actually work?
It's a really elegant piece of quantum engineering. Essentially, it's a way to peek into how a system evolves by kind of running time backwards for a moment.
Okay.
So they start by setting up a stable quantum system. They used up to 103 qubits in their experiments. Then they deliberately introduce chaos. They let the system evolve forward in time that's represented by a mathematical operation UR. This scrambles all the initial quantum information perfectly.
So once it's chaotic, the original state is basically lost, hidden in the complexity.
Exactly. That's how quantum systems normally behave when they interact. Now, right at the peak of this induced chaos, they do something very precise. They introduce a tiny, tiny disturbance, like a nudge, to just one single qubit. That's the operator B.
That's the butterfly flapping its
That's the butterfly, yeah. And now here's the magic trick that classical computers just fundamentally cannot do.
Yeah.
They run the entire process perfectly in reverse.
How?
Using the inverse operation, U dagger,
Yeah.
U. It's the mathematical opposite of the forward evolution U. It perfectly undoes the scrambling. Almost.
Because of the nudge.
Precisely. See, if they hadn't applied that little nudge, B running U, and then U dagger would just return the system perfectly back to its simple starting state.
Yeah.
You wouldn't learn anything interesting.
But that tiny perturbation changes everything.
It does, because when they run time backwards, that nudge prevents the system from returning exactly to the start. So they measure the final state, M, and what they measure is a faint but precise echo of that original nudge, B.
An echo.
Yeah, an echo that reveals exactly how the quantum interactions within the system spread that initial tiny change across all the other qubits during the chaotic phase.
Well,
it acts like this incredibly sensitive, longer molecular ruler, as the researchers put it. It lets scientists measure things like correlation lengths, how different parts of the system are connected, with amazing sensitivity, information that was just completely inaccessible before.
Okay, this mechanism, this ruler, it leads us straight to this computational gap, and that's where the numbers get just mind-bending, right?
Yeah, this is where you see the sheer scale of the advantage. So the full experiment, running these OTOC calculations on Google's Willow chip with 65 qubits, it took about 2 hours.
2 hours. Okay.
Now, they estimated what it would take to simulate just one single data point from that experiment on Frontier, which is, the world's fastest classical supercomputer currently.
And the estimate was?
3.2 years.
For one data point.
For one data point. To run the entire experiment classically, the full set of data points the quantum computer did in 2 hours. They conservatively estimated it would require something like 13,000 times longer.
13,000 times? We're talking, what, decades versus hours?
Yeah. It's converting potential decades of classical computing time into a couple of hours on a quantum chip.
That's not just a faster chip. That feels like a fundamentally different kind of computation.
It absolutely is. And this huge gap, this chasm, really, it's rooted in the fundamental mathematics of quantum mechanics itself, something our sources call the sign problem.
The sign problem. Okay, can you break that down simply? Because that seems key to why quantum has this edge.
I'll try. It really comes down to the kind of numbers each type of computer uses. Classical computing, the kind in your phone or laptop, it works with probabilities.
Right. Things have to happen or not happen, percentages.
Exactly. And probabilities always have to be non-negative, 0%, 50%, 100%. You can't have a negative 50% chance of rain.
Okay, makes sense.
But quantum mechanics, it doesn't use simple probabilities. It uses something called complex probability amplitudes. And the key thing is, these amplitudes can have arbitrary signs. They can be positive, negative, or even complex numbers involving the square root of -1.
So classical math only adds up positive values, essentially, while quantum math involves numbers that can cancel each other out.
That's a great way to put it. Think of classical probabilities like stacking blocks. You can only add more blocks. The pile only gets bigger. Quantum amplitudes are more like waves on a pond.
Okay.
Waves can add up constructively, making a bigger wave, positive amplitude adding to positive, or they can interfere destructively, canceling each other out. Positive amplitude meeting a negative one.
Ah, interference.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in really complex, chaotic quantum calculations, like these OTOCs, keeping track of all the ways these positive and negative amplitudes interfere and cancel out is absolutely crucial to getting the right answer.
And classical computers struggle with that.
Massively. Classical simulation methods, like something called quantum Monte Carlo, they try to approximate this by sampling probabilities. But because they're stuck with non-negative probabilities, they fundamentally fail to efficiently capture all that cancellation. The number of interference pathways grows exponentially, and the errors just explode. It's called the sign problem, because managing those plus and minus signs correctly becomes computationally impossible for classical machines beyond a certain complexity.
But the quantum computer...
The quantum computer naturally works with these complex amplitudes. It lives in that world of interference, so it just bypasses that mathematical wall entirely.
Okay, so this isn't just a theoretical win. What's the immediate practical application of being able to calculate these OTOCs?
The most immediate utility is something called Hamiltonian learning.
Hamiltonian, like the musical.
No, not quite. In physics, a Hamiltonian is basically the mathematical description of a physical system. It's the rule book that governs its energy, how its parts interact.
Got it. The system's blueprint.
Exactly. So the quantum computer can simulate the OTOC signals for a specific physical system, maybe a potential new drug molecule or a new material for solar cells.
Okay.
Then scientists can compare that quantum simulation output to actual experimental data they gather in the lab, maybe using techniques like NMR spectroscopy.
Nuclear magnetic resonance, right? Like an MRI machine.
The very same underlying principle, yeah. So they compare the simulated OTOCs to the real measured OTOCs. If they don't match perfectly, they tweak the parameters in their simulation's Hamiltonian on the quantum computer and run it again.
And keep doing that until the simulation matches reality.
Precisely. They iterate, refining the simulation until the calculated OTOCs perfectly match the measured ones. When they match bingo, you've essentially used the quantum computer to figure out a near-perfect, highly refined mathematical model of that real-world physical system. It's Hamiltonian.
That's incredibly powerful for discovery, designing new materials, new medicines.
Absolutely. The potential to accelerate scientific discovery is immense.
And that ability, that sudden, verified explosion of computational power and discovery speed, that's what loops us back to the futurists, isn't it? It seems to confirm Ray Kurzweil's big idea, the law of accelerating returns, LOAR.
It really does. It suggests that the exponential curve he's been talking about isn't flattening out. If anything, with quantum coming online, it might be getting even steeper.
Which makes the whole philosophical concept of the singularity feel less like, distant sci-fi.
And much more like a potential technologically driven inevitability.
Okay, so let's shift gears then. This verified acceleration, it basically validates the core visions, or at least makes them seem much more plausible for thinkers like Kurzweil and Martin Rothblatt.
Right. Now that we have this, let's call it proof of concept for exponential tech acceleration, their ideas move from the fringe, maybe, into something we need to consider as a potential blueprint for the next couple of decades.
Kurzweil first. He's not just a philosopher, he's actually a principal researcher at Google, right? And he has laid out this incredibly specific, almost aggressive timeline for the human-machine merger.
Yeah, his predictions are famously precise. He's not talking centuries from now. He's talking within many of our lifetimes.
What's the timeline again?
He predicts AGI, artificial general intelligence, meaning AI, basically indistinguishable from a human mind, that could pass a really robust Turing test.
Yeah.
By 2029.
2029? Wow, that's just around the corner.
It is startlingly close.
Yeah.
Then he sees brain-cloud interfaces, like actual physical connections, linking our neocortex to cloud computing emerging in the 2030s.
Extending our minds into the digital realm.
Essentially, yeah. And then the big one, the singularity itself, the definitive merger of biological human cognition with advanced artificial intelligence, resulting in things like radical life extension, maybe even practical immortality.
And he puts a date on that, too.
Around 2045.
Okay, I have to push back a bit here, as our sources do. Even with this quantum leap, creating true AGI, replicating the sheer complexity of the human brain, interfacing it with the cloud, those hurdles seem immense. Isn't that timeline still wildly optimistic?
Well, that skepticism is exactly the point his critics hammer home. But Kurzweil's defense, and the sources supporting his view, argue that this quantum breakthrough fundamentally changes the calculation, especially for AGI. His entire framework rests on this law of accelerating returns, LOA.
Explain LOAR again, quickly.
It's the idea that technological progress feeds on itself, creating a positive feedback loop that accelerates over time. We use current computers to design faster computers. Those faster computers help us build more sophisticated AI. That AI then helps us design even faster computers and better manufacturing processes.
It compounds exponentially.
Exactly. It's a double exponential feedback loop. He argues we're consistently underestimating the speed because our intuition is linear, but progress is exponential.
So he sees 2029 not as some single magical invention, but as the almost mathematical outcome of that compounding curve, now supercharged by quantum capabilities.
That's his view. The ability to simulate complex systems with quantum speed, designing new materials for chips, understanding protein folding for AI algorithms that mimic biology, it just pours fuel on that fire. So for him, those dates aren't just possible, they're practically inevitable, barring some major catastrophe like an asteroid or global war.
Okay, but When we talk about merging with AI or uploading minds, we hit that massive philosophical wall. Consciousness,
Hard problem, yeah.
subjective experience, qualia, the feeling of being you. If we upload a perfect copy of your brain's data, is it still you experiencing the world? Or just a simulation? How does Kurzweil tackle that?
He addresses it head on, actually. He moves beyond simple materialism, the idea that consciousness is just a byproduct of brain chemistry. He leans on ideas like panprotopsychism.
Panprotopsychism.
Yeah.
Bit of a mouthful.
It is. But the core idea is that consciousness isn't something unique that emerges only from complex biology like ours. Instead, it's seen as a fundamental property of the universe, maybe like electromagnetism or gravity, just latent.
Latent, meaning it's everywhere, just not always active.
Sort of. The idea is that consciousness isn't created by complexity, but rather it's awakened or expressed when an information processing system reaches a certain threshold of complexity and interconnectedness.
Regardless of whether that system is made of carbon or ice silicon.
Exactly. So from this perspective, if an advanced AI reaches that complexity threshold, processes information in a way functionally similar to our brain, and importantly, claims to be conscious,
We shouldn't dismiss it just because it's a machine.
Kurzweil argues we'd have no objective philosophical grounds to deny its sentience simply based on its substrate. And therefore, merging with such an AI wouldn't necessarily destroy our consciousness, but could potentially expand it, enhance our subjective experience.
That's the utopian promise then, a merger leading to transcendence.
That's the vision. The singularity in this view isn't just about living longer. It's about ushering in an era of radical problem solving, using nanobots designed with quantum simulations to repair our bodies at the molecular level, eliminating disease, reversing aging,
Solving climate change, poverty.
generating such an abundance of new ideas, new energy sources, new material wealth through AI-driven innovation that complex global problems finally become tractable. And this abundance, Kurzweil argues, would naturally support, even necessitate, new social structures like universal basic income.
To handle the job displacement from AI and automation.
Right. And to ensure everyone has access to the basic resources needed to benefit from this technological explosion, rather than creating an even wider gap between rich and poor.
Okay, let's pivot slightly from Kurzweil's broad technological singularity to Martine Rothblatt's focus, which is more on identity and, well, rights, her concept of freedom of form.
Yes, this is a really fascinating and potent argument that connects transhumanism directly to social justice and human rights movement.
How so?
Rothblatt draws a direct line from the fight for transgender rights. She argues that movement established a crucial principle, that our personal identity, our sense of self, is not irrevocably locked to the biological form we happen to be born with.
Okay, that self-identity can transcend biology.
Right. And if we accept that principle, Rothblatt argues, then the next logical step in human liberation must be the freedom to choose our very form.
Meaning, choosing not just gender presentation, but the actual physical or non-physical substrate of our existence.
Exactly. The freedom to choose to exist in our current flesh, or perhaps in an upgraded cybernetic body, or as software in a digital realm, or even controlling a swarm of nanobots.
And she sees this not just as a futuristic possibility, but as a necessary right.
The necessary right to prevent future injustice. Her sources warn strongly against creating a new apartheid of form.
Apartheid of form, meaning a split between those who can afford or access these enhancements and those who can't.
Precisely. If only the wealthy elite can upload their minds or get cybernetic bodies, shedding biological limitations while the rest remain constrained, you create a fundamental, unbridgeable divide in humanity.
A biological caste system, essentially.
Yes. So, for Rothblatt, ensuring everyone has the right to choose their form, making transhuman options accessible, becomes an ethical imperative to maintain any semblance of equality in the future.
And to make this concrete, she didn't just write about it. She, through the Terrassa Movement Foundation, actually built a prototype, didn't she? Bina 48.
That's right. Bina 48 is, well, it's quite something. It's a humanoid robot bust, quite lifelike in appearance.
And inside?
Inside, it runs software based on what they call a mind file. This is a vast digital archive compiled from literally thousands of hours of interviews, recorded memories, beliefs, values, emotional responses, all collected from her actual spouse, Bina Rothblatt.
So the robot tries to simulate the personality and memories of the real Bina.
It does. It's designed to converse, to access those archived memories and beliefs, and respond in a way that mimics the original Bina's personality.
It's more than just a chatbot, then. It's intended as a proof of concept.
Absolutely. It's a proof of concept for the core ideas of digital immortality and mind uploading. It's the cornerstone of their Life Knot project.
Life not.
Yeah, the goal of Life Knot is explicitly to offer people the tools to create their own mind files, preserve their identity digitally, with the hope that future technology will allow that consciousness, or at least a convincing replica of it, to be transferred into a new substrate after biological death. Maybe a robot like Bina 48 or a virtual environment.
Just the existence of Bina 48, even as a prototype, it really forces you to confront some uncomfortable questions about identity, personhood, what life even means, doesn't it?
It throws all our current legal and ethical definitions into question. Is Bina 48 a person? Does it have rights? If you could make a perfect copy, is it the same? It pushes all those boundaries.
Okay, so we have the tech acceleration, seemingly verified by quantum advantage. We have these incredibly optimistic utopian visions from Kurzweil and Rothblatt. Transcendence, freedom, immortality.
The promise is immense.
And it's a huge but. This soaring optimism crashes headfirst into some incredibly strong, deeply felt skepticism and criticism. People who see this not as elevation, but as, well, annihilation.
Yeah, the backlash presented in our sources is profound, coming from scientific, social, and philosophical angles. It's often quite visceral, even angry.
Let's start with that visceral reaction. The biological critique, maybe best represented by the biologist P.Z. Myers. He doesn't mince words, does he?
No, he definitely does not. He's famously called transhumanism bullshit and a tech bro fantasy. Pretty blunt.
Okay. Why such a strong rejection? What's his core argument?
Myers' critique comes from a purely biological materialist standpoint. He argues that transhumanists, especially those focused on mind uploading, fundamentally misunderstand biology. They make the mistake of thinking the mind is like software.
A program you can just copy and run on different hardware.
Exactly. Myers insists that's just dead wrong. He argues consciousness isn't software. It's an emergent property of our incredibly complex biological wetware.
Wetware.
Meaning the entire messy, integrated system. The specific structure of our neurons, the chemical soup of hormones and neurotransmitters, the constant feedback loops, the evolutionary baggage, all of it working together. Consciousness arises from that physical substrate. It's inseparable from it.
So for Myers, copying the data isn't copying the experience. You need the actual physical brain.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
He argues our consciousness is a product of billions of years of evolution, full of weird hacks and biological constraints. You can't just map the connections, digitize the information, expect the subjective feeling of being you to magically appear in a silicon chip.
So what does he make of something like Bina 48 then?
He'd likely view it as, in his words, sophisticated scrapbooking. Meaning, yes, you've created an incredibly detailed digital archive, a behavioral model that can mimic the person's memories and personality remarkably well. But you haven't transferred the actual conscious subject. You've just made a very high-fidelity puppet or copy. The original consciousness, he'd argue, stays tied to the biological brain and dies with it.
Okay, so that's the biological, it's impossible argument. What about the socio-political danger? This is where Francis Fukuyama comes in, right? He called transhumanism.
Perhaps the world's most dangerous idea.
That's a heavy statement. Why so dangerous in his view?
Fukuyama's concern isn't about technical feasibility. It's about the potential impact on the very foundations of modern society, specifically liberal democracy.
How so?
He argues that our entire political system, stemming from the Enlightenment, things like the Declaration of Independence, they all rest on one absolutely crucial, almost sacred premise: the existence of a shared, fundamental human essence. The idea that all men are created equal, that despite our differences, there's a common humanity with inherent dignity and rights that binds us together.
Okay, the basis for universal human rights.
Exactly. That shared essence, even with all its flaws, is the bedrock of our social contract, our legal systems, our democratic ideals.
And Fukuyama fears technology could shatter that bedrock.
That's his core warning. If we use technology, whether it's genetic engineering, advanced brain-computer interfaces, whatever, to create a fundamentally enhanced class of beings, posthumans.
Beings who are significantly smarter, healthier, longer-lived, maybe emotionally different.
Yes. If we create beings that are demonstrably superior to the biological baseline, Fukuyama warns we destroy that foundational concept of a shared human essence. And if that goes, the moral legitimacy of democracy collapses.
How could a political system based on equality possibly govern a population split between baseline humans and posthumans?
It couldn't, he argues. The enhanced elite would inevitably see the unenhanced as fundamentally different, likely inferior. It shatters the social contract and replaces democracy with a potentially permanent, biologically based hierarchy. a new, terrifying caste system.
Beyond that stratification, he also worried about unintended consequences, right, of trying to improve human nature.
Yes, that's another key point. He stresses that human nature, shaped by evolution, is this incredibly complex package deal. Our positive traits, things like loyalty, courage, empathy, ambition, are often deeply intertwined with traits we might see as negative aggression, tribalism, fear.
You can't just tweak one without affecting the others.
It's incredibly risky. If you try to, say, genetically engineer out aggression to create a more peaceful society, you might inadvertently eliminate the capacity for righteous anger, self-defense, or the drive to compete and achieve. We simply don't understand the connections well enough. Trying to fix one trait could have catastrophic, unforeseen consequences for the whole package that makes us human.
It's like pulling a thread and potentially unraveling the whole sweater.
A very complex, evolved sweater, yes. He warns the outcome is utterly unpredictable and poses a genuine existential risk.
Okay, this skepticism about the technology and its underlying motivations, that brings us to Jaron Lanier. He coined a specific term for the ideology he saw driving some of this, didn't he?
He did. Cybernetic totalism.
What does that mean, exactly?
Lanier uses it to describe what he sees as a kind of quasi-religious belief system that has taken hold among parts of the tech elite, particularly those driving towards the singularity.
A belief system centered on...
Centered on the idea that computation information patterns, data itself,
Mm.
that this is the ultimate fundamental reality, more real, more important than messy biological human existence.
So human values, subjective experience, our physical bodies, they become secondary to the purity of the algorithm, the data stream.
That's the implication Lanier points to.
Yeah.
Cybernetic totalism subordinates human values to what its adherents see as inevitable technological progress. Humans are viewed almost as faulty, temporary hardware, destined to be replaced or subsumed by the superior, eternal software of AI.
He sees Kurzweil's singularity vision less as science and more as religion.
As a form of secular eschatology, yes, a kind of end-times prophecy for the digital age. Lanier finds it dangerous because this belief system can then be used to justify almost anything in the present inequalities, ethical compromises, social disruption as just necessary steps on the predetermined path towards this glorious computational future.
A future where humans are maybe just data points.
Where our messy subjective consciousness might be seen as inefficient noise to be filtered out or uploaded into the purer digital reality. Lanier sees it as a kind of spiritual surrender, trading human agency for the promise of technological immortality and certainty.
Which leads directly into the humanistic critique, focusing on meaning, value, and, well, the fear of death. Nathan Hamill's criticism hits this point hard, right? That the whole quest is driven by a willingness to
Shed every bit of his humanity. Yeah, that's a powerful quote from Hamill discussed in the source material.
What's the core of that argument?
It's that the intense desire to conquer mortality, to achieve digital immortality or radical life extension at any cost, leads people down a path where they willingly sacrifice the very things that give life meaning in the first place.
Meaning comes from.
From struggle, from effort, from limitations. Hamill argues that genuine achievement, deep love, empathy, the feeling of accomplishment, these things derive their value precisely because life is fragile, finite, and often difficult.
So if technology makes everything easy, like Kurzweil's example of simulating a Mount Everest climb,
Then the experience becomes devalued, Hamill argues. If you can have the perfect virtual vacation instantly, or simulate climbing Everest without the risk, the cold, the exhaustion, it loses its value. The struggle is what validates the achievement. Take away the struggle, take away the stakes, and you cheapen the experience, maybe even render it meaningless.
it makes life frictionless, but maybe also valueless.
That's the fear. And Hamill extends this specifically to those digital copies, like the replicant Kurzweil reportedly created based on his deceased father's letters and writings.
What's the critique there?
Hamill sees these mind files and digital replicas as a cheap illusion, maybe even a form of profound narcissism.
How so?
He argues they offer a kind of emotional get-out-of-jail-free card. If you believe you can create a convincing digital copy of a loved one after they die, maybe it lessens the urgency, the need to do the hard, messy, demanding emotional work of truly connecting with them while they are alive.
Why invest the difficult effort now if you think you can just chat with a simulation later?
Exactly. It risks reducing deep human relationships, grief, and memory into a kind of passive data transaction. You substitute the hard reality of loss and the richness of real connection with a convenient, interactive digital archive.
Wow, okay. And finally, there's a theological angle to the critique as well,
Yeah.
viewing this pursuit as a kind of spiritual error.
Yes, some thinkers, like Anton Sack and Harris Bohr mentioned in the sources, frame the quest for technological immortality, the singularity, as leading towards a form of spiritual slavery.
Spiritual slavery.
Their argument is that by rejecting our biological nature, our finitude, our mortality, and seeking to become masters of our own existence through technology, we paradoxically end up enslaving ourselves to that technology. Becoming cogs in the machine we built, essentially, yes. In chasing godhood through tech, we risk becoming mere components in a vast computational system. Linea's cybernetic totalism, again losing our free will, our intrinsic worth, our connection to something beyond the material. They argue that accepting mortality, embracing our limits, is actually necessary for true human freedom, for ethical living, and perhaps for genuine spiritual growth. Trying to conquer death technologically is seen as a profound spiritual mistake.
Okay, so putting all these pieces together, the pro side, the anti side, where does that leave us? It feels like a head-on collision.
It really is. If you synthesize all these sources, the core conflict becomes incredibly sharp. On one hand, you have the seemingly unstoppable force of technological acceleration, proven now by things like quantum advantage, driven by this engine of all IR. It suggests radical transformation is not just possible, but maybe inevitable.
Pushing towards Kurzweil's transcendence and Rothblatt's freedom of form.
Right. The promise of finally conquering suffering, disease, death, and the limitations of biology itself. A promise of ultimate liberation and expansion.
But colliding directly with that is the deep-seated value placed on our current human condition. The arguments from Myers about the necessity of our biological wetware for consciousness.
Fukuyama's defense of the shared human essence as the foundation of political equality. Lanier's warning about cybernetic totalism reducing us to data.
And Hamiel's point about meaning derived from struggle and finitude.
Exactly. It's technological inevitability versus the inherent value of biological limits, the sanctity of the human social contract, and the very definition of a meaningful life.
The stakes, then, are, well, everything. Defining what human even means going forward.
Absolutely everything. The pro-transhumanist side promises total victory over our biological constraints, a potential utopia free from suffering.
While the anti-transhumanist side warns that this victory comes at the catastrophic cost of creating a permanent, unequal split in humanity, destroying the philosophical basis for democracy, and ultimately trading our flawed but meaningful existence for one that might be easy, long, but fundamentally empty and valueless.
A trade of, perhaps, freedom for a comfortable digital servitude.
It really throws Fukuyama's core warning into sharp relief, doesn't it? That if technology succeeds in shattering the idea that we all share a fundamental human nature,
Then the entire political project of the last few centuries, democracy, human rights, equality under the law, all built on that very idea, could just crumble instantly, undone by the sheer speed of technological change.
So the debate isn't really about if we can eventually merge with AI or radically enhance ourselves anymore. The quantum breakthrough suggests the if is becoming a when.
Right. The urgent questions now are, should we? Under what conditions? And maybe most critically, who gets to benefit and who gets left behind? Who gets to define what the next human looks like?
And who gets governed by potentially superior beings.
That's the unsettling endgame, isn't it?
Okay, let's try to wrap this up. What are the absolute key takeaways from this deep dive?
Well, I think the first clear takeaway is that technological progress, particularly in foundational areas like quantum computing, is accelerating exponentially. The quantum echoes result provides concrete evidence, forcing us to take timelines like Kurzweil's, maybe not as gospel, but seriously. The singularity is now technologically plausible within a foreseeable future.
Plausible, but the second takeaway has to be the sheer scale of the ethical and social risks that plausibility brings into immediate focus.
Absolutely. The concerns about cybernetic totalism, the potential destruction of political equality that Fukuyama warns about, the loss of meaning. Hamiel highlights these aren't abstract philosophical problems anymore. They are urgent, practical questions we need to grapple with now while the technology is still being developed. We're past the point of just casual speculation.
We are literally building the tools, quantum computers, advanced AI, gene editing, like CRISPR.
Tools that allow us to redesign matter, simulate reality at unprecedented levels, and yes, potentially redesign ourselves, our biology, maybe even the nature of identity.
And the companies, the researchers, the nations pushing these boundaries right now, They are setting the course for the next decade, probably much longer. The speed is the critical factor.
Which brings us to the final provocative thought, maybe for you, the listener, to chew on.
Okay.
The quantum breakthrough and the LOAR it validates essentially guarantees blinding speed, exponential acceleration. The real question might not be if we can adapt, but can our governance systems possibly keep up?
Can our slow, messy, consensus-based political and ethical frameworks possibly steer this exponential technological rocket ship?
Or will the technology simply outpace our ability to understand its implications and regulate it meaningfully? Will the enhanced elite or the superintelligent AI emerge before we've even figured out the rules of the road? Are we prepared to think and govern at quantum speed, embracing that uncertainty? Or are we hoping our classical modes of thinking can somehow hold the line against an exponential tide? That might be the ultimate crossroads we're facing right now.